Hi, everyone. Once again, like I was mentioning, I apologize for no cute cat pictures or Audrey's adorable photo album from childhood to now. But hopefully, Jason and my story of our experience in the ACE workflow cohort hopefully can hold your attention just for the next few minutes. Um, Jason and I, during the ACE workflow cohort, we revised our research contract enrollment process. And we approached the project as a team. So naturally, we both have two different perspectives on our experience in the cohort and two different stories. So I'll kick it off, and then immediately after, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Jason. So to get started, I'm going to reintroduce myself. I am Maggie Schmall, and I am admittedly a recovering perfectionist. I begin with this honest admission because while this is a story about building an internal workflow using my UCLA forms and Google Sheets, it's also about self-transformation, both personal and professional. I'll start sort of at the beginning. When I began my career at UCLA 7 years ago. At that time, I was lucky enough to learn from the best, in my opinion. My predecessor and mentor, Connie Firestone, taught me everything that I know today about undergrad advising and working in an academic department. This was my first job in advising, and it was also my first big girl job. And so with that, I made it my goal to just absorb and mirror everything that Connie did. And although the molecular cell and developmental biology major could no longer be considered a boutique major, Connie had an individualized approach to each and every student, and that never waned. And it was especially admirable given that the major was growing exponentially, and it totaled more than 800 students by the time I started in my position. Her individualized approach applied to both her one-on-one interactions with students, as well as her meticulous, if not manual, methods that she used to track student data. She took great care so that our students never felt like they were a student ID number, and that our office never felt like the DMV, her words. This approach not only shaped the early years in my job, but it has stayed with me even to this day as part of my own advising philosophy. I took over Connie's position in summer 2023 when she retired. And at that time, my only goal was to survive my first year without any major issues. So I was hesitant to make any significant changes for fear that they might not work out. And instead, I was just going to rely on the strong foundation that I had built under her mentorship. You know what they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So with that, it did admittedly take me about 1.5 years to settle into my new role, the one that I'm currently in. And it took time to quiet that paranoia that something was going to go terribly wrong under my watch. And I needed to bolster my self-confidence, especially without having Connie to lean on for advice and support. So to be honest, I can't quite pinpoint a specific time, place, or moment in which I finally felt like I built up the courage to even consider making a few changes to our departmental workflows and the way that we had always done things. So this was not instantaneous, but rather a gradual transformation, sort of a slow burn as I felt like I was coming into my own as an advisor. And so I began to realize that playing it safe, sticking to the old way of doing things was no longer beneficial to me or my students. And this is not to say that the way we had done things in the past was flawed or that our students weren't being adequately served, but I had begun to reflect on my individualized and manual approach to students and student data, and I recognized that it was probably prime time to evolve a little bit. So in all honesty, just to be clear, I At this point, I wasn't meeting with each individual student one-on-one because I was motivated by my individualized approach to advising. Rather, this practice just became necessary because information was neither readily accessible nor navigable to students on their own. I want to still maintain an individualized approach to advising, but I simultaneously hope to make my students less reliant on a meeting with me to understand the opportunities that are available to them in our major. And so to do this, I had two humble goals. I wanted to make some long overdue updates to our department's website, and I wanted to migrate a few of our departmental processes over to my UCLA forms. Without a clear path forward, however, I felt overwhelmed, not knowing where to even begin. I was caught in a vicious cycle between knowing that change was necessary, but without any bandwidth or time to enact it. I had also convinced myself that change needed to be immediate and significant. And this was my perfection definitely preventing me from making any changes, big or small. And so this self-perceived inability to enact change in my department was honestly beginning to take its toll, so much so that I was beginning to question my longevity in this job. But I'm going to use the same word that Audrey used previously, that despite being in this relatively low point this past spring, quite serendipitously came Bessie and Shala's call to join the ACE summer workflow cohort. And it's one of those things that I easily could have convinced myself, I didn't have the time for it. I don't have to apply. I don't have time to apply. I don't have time to commit to a 12-week program. But I don't know. It just seemed like too sweet of an opportunity to pass up. I wanted to learn how to use my UCLA forms anyways. And so I made the time to complete the application. I submitted it right before the deadline. Looking back, if I had not joined the cohort, I fear that this is where my story would have ended. Without the resources, support, and lessons gained through my participation, I'm certain I would still be mustering through the same old way of doing things, too overwhelmed to know where to start, my own perfectionism preventing me from taking that first initial step. So I really owe my transformation, both personal and professional, to Bessie and Shala and the overall cohort experience. And there are so many moments from this past summer that came together to form such a transformational overall experience. But for the sake of time, I've narrowed it down just a few just to illustrate my points. So to begin, I will remind you that I came to the ACE workflow cohort with an all or nothing energy. Again, change needed to be immediate, significant, final, to be worth my while. And so the cohort application, it asked us to describe a departmental process or workflow that we wanted to create or revise. So naturally, I proposed 3. And I had the full intention and unrealistic expectation that I was going to tackle all of them by summer's end. I am no Maite. I can't do 3 over the summer. So Bessie and Shala quickly reined me in and encouraged me to select just 1. And it only took a couple of weeks for me to understand that this change was going to require time and patience, and it was a 12-week program overall. And this change was also going to be ongoing. And I've come to realize that, given that I'm still making revisions to our departmental process that I proposed all the way back in June. I'm also happy to report, coming out of the cohort, that I have overcome at least some of my personal anxiety surrounding data and technology. Admittedly, Connie's individualized approach to students and manual data tracking were very convenient for me, especially because I never considered myself tech or data savvy. I've resisted a deep dive into Excel for years now. And don't get me wrong, our departmental processes still utilized some sort of spreadsheet, but we would always be using them more qualitatively than quantitatively. So we would log and track individual students, cases, petitions, etc. We never really aggregated or analyzed that data in any sort of way. So with that in mind, now imagine Bessie introducing us in the cohort to Google Sheets and using words like array formula, XLOOKUP, concatenate. If you know, you know. And I would be lying if I said that I never attended Bessie's office hours on the verge of tears, because I just couldn't for the life of me wrap my head around what an XLOOKUP function was and how that was different from the array formula. But jokes aside, the cohort provided me with time to learn, permission to fail, and support to try again and again. And I am now more confident in my technical skills related to Excel, Google Sheets. And I've come so far as to now understand that automating, aggregating, analyzing student data, it's not antithetical to my individualized approach to advising. And that, in fact, the time that I now save by no longer manually tracking this data, I can now more efficiently use it to support my individual students. And so my very last anecdote here, last but not least, without the cohort, without being part of it, I would not have experienced just that sweet sense of accomplishment. The project I overtook this summer, like I mentioned, is far from over, but I think back to my first light bulb moment in halfway through the program. And I now look back at that and see that even small wins, small steps can provide momentum for future, more significant change. And so just like I'm not able to pinpoint a single precise moment when I felt prepared enough or brave enough to seek change in my department a couple years ago, I view my transformation through summer 2025 also as a slow burn. Progress is neither immediate nor is it linear. It takes time, a lot of time, and it requires patience and an understanding that the process is going to be, it's going to be messy. But given these things, it's amazing to witness the change that can be accomplished. Participating in the cohort gave me, again, the opportunity, time, and space to make sure tangible changes to my departmental workflow. But it also gave me time for self-transformation and reflection, both personal and professional. So I was going to originally end this talk by sharing more about how the project I took on is still in progress, a full 10 weeks after the end of summer. I was going to speak how change is ongoing and there's still so much more to come. And while that is all true, writing this talk has also inspired me to instead take a moment to pause and celebrate all that's been accomplished. And as a recovering perfectionist, giving myself that little bit of credit has never been easy to do. So with that, here's to giving ourselves permission to change and to do it again and again and again. And with that, I will pass the mic over to Jason to share his experience.
Hey everyone, thank you. My name is Jason Giron, and I'm also a student services advisor alongside with Maggie here within MCDB. I will be talking about my experience within the ACE cohort, especially with this form that we were working with for about 12 weeks, and I have been working with since my time being here with MCDB. So a little bit of background about myself. I joined September 2024, and right in the middle of it, I was right in fall quarter. I was not only pushed into it, but it felt like I was just the baby bird leaving the nest, and I was just going full force down that flight, learning as I go, asking questions, and more so, it was a learning experience as I went on through the quarters, knowing that this process had not only to be changed, but the willingness that Maggie had to hearing me out, stating that there should be a time saver on this, or we should be able to communicate a little bit more when it comes to saving time, having more communication for our students, or just more time where we can plan these things out. It gave us sense, or it gave us more hope that with this change, or even with these somewhat of changes that we could have, it's something of a cycle that we could break. I'll tell you right now, within every quarter, we have nearly about 130 submissions of research contracts. So divided between the two of us, we're looking at about 20 hours of week 2 of just us sitting down, looking at these research contracts. And we were desperately needing some time back just because it gives us motivation to either talk to more students, have other plans for students, and even more so just giving us the ability to just have what we need in some sense of the time that we have to come together to just check in with each other and make sure that the quarter is going great. We have each other's backs, and it's something that we can actually work on. It was obvious that there was, or we did felt trapped in this cycle, but the longer that we did go for it, the longer that Maggie and I had to sit down and say there might be a reason to change, and this might be the change. And just like Maggie had said, it's just felt so almost like an angelic feeling when we got the invitation for that ACE summer workflow cohort. Given that we did have to sit down, and knowing that Maggie was a perfectionist, when she did pitch 3 ideas, I was just like, okay, 3, let's go ahead and let's do all 3 then. I'm so for it. I'm more than happy to get on that ship and just, go for it. But luckily, we did get a chance to narrow it down where we could put all our efforts into creating something more, where we did end up just including the revamp of our research contract workflow. This gave us a better opportunity to have a sense of how we can change it, what changes needed to be made, and especially because working with it for 12 weeks, it gave Maggie a sense of it doesn't always need to be perfect. These small changes and small wins can actually help us with our students overall. Within probably the last 6 weeks, we were probably going more so testing that form out more than any other student was probably going to apply for that research said contract course. But we were giving these contract courses more thought, more availability for our students to understand that the communication that we're trying to actually work with is actually something that we're able to all understand. We were all able to have, it was all in congruence, and we were able to be transparent as possible. But knowing that even with that being said, it was a struggle to start off with, especially with the amount of formulas, the amount of data that we did have to work with. Sometimes working from the old process to the new process, evaluating those things did come into play. I was overall looking at our inherited system where we were manually looking at emails, the endless copying and pasting, the jungling between multiple spreadsheets and tabs that we had to do. It became sort of a nuance, but not of a nuance, because this is just repetition of what we already knew. But we knew saving even 5 hours from this total process would give us 5 hours to sit down for this ACE flow work cohort to sit down and just talk about how we could change this. But knowing that change, it actually did help us because it didn't help postpone change, or it didn't feel like we were abandoning it. It actually realized that the complete overhaul wasn't possible, but small improvements still mattered. When I was looking at this by shifting to the My UCLA forms, we were able to get cleaner data. We were able to stop the automated repetitive tasks. And it actually felt lighter in the sense of when we were able to talk about this, it wasn't more so of an angry monster, but somewhat of an easily relaxed state of mind where it was just like, how are you doing on your end? Are there any updates or anything that on your research contracts that we needed to talk about? Overall, looking at that data and being able just to scan right through it, knowing that everything was complete, it helped us further go through the process, and knowing that we could stop feeling or acting as human routers because the system was actually doing that for us. So it gave us a sense of accomplishment because we weren't or didn't have to always look at that data, but it was already being done for us where we didn't, or we could focus on the more personal factors for each student. And it reminded us that progress doesn't have to be complete, but it just has to be valuable. At the end of the day, when it did come to the ACE resource or ACE cohort, when we were talking amongst ourselves, or especially with Bessie and Shala, the overall goal was to focus on how we could simplify this and also be there for our students. Given this, that we were able to do this, we actually kept the rhythm of Rule 6 of reflect, evolve, and repeat. We were always looking and reflecting on the newly in Google form. We were also evolving it as time went on, as students were actually uploading it. And this repetition gave us more so that going more or learning everything that we needed to know about Google Sheets, it would help us through other processes or other means of using my UCLA forms, giving us an overhaul that would actually be in small steps and still giving us that data that we needed. And at the end of it, Maggie and I, we both felt energized. We both felt that knowing that we could just complete one of these tasks and going into everything, we can actually simplify, streamline, and actually rebuild on this. We can actually improve on our research contract going more so into it. Within this data, we're able to save about 5 hours. And now being in week 2, we're actually saving, yes, 5 hours. So going down from 20 hours to 15 hours. We're actually reclaiming that efficiency, giving us time for optimism in that space. Knowing that we're able actually now to take some of the data and some of the things that we've learned from our other cohort members and what they've been doing and actually put that forward for our own MCDB department. So it's actually going to help our students. And overall, we did gain one experience from everyone. It was just knowing that we could be there, we can ask questions. Overall, the ACE was more so of a community of sorts, where sometimes we did feel lost, but normally that we could come together, come towards it and say, when we did feel like this, does everybody else feel like this? And when we did, it felt more so like, okay, we're all in this together. We can all keep going. But Bessie and Charlotte did end up helping us and saving us sometimes. So that was the overall mission at the end as well. But overall speaking, we're able to reclaim that headspace and workspace, and moving forward, Maggie and I are able to attend to different needs for our students and our MCDB department. Thank you.